This week, we're talking to an attorney who started biking in Chicago when he started law school and then picked it back up years later for commuting and exploring. Take a listen.
This is my bike, and it is a BMC Alpine Challenge commuter bike that I bought from Roscoe Village Bikes over in Roscoe Village. I figure I should give them a shout out. Um, it is it is a 8-speed belt drive disc brake, and which kind of makes it a perfect commuter bike for Chicago because it's flat here and you don't need 21 speeds. And the belt shifter is just internal hub shifting is kind of remarkable because it just makes it super easy to shift gears up and downhill. And of course, around here, there's not a lot of hills. So, and I love my bike. So I've been biking in Chicago since 1994, since I moved here 30 years ago. I started before I moved here, I was a bicycle commuter. When I got here, I started law school in 1994. I was living in Lincoln Park, and law school was downtown. And I just found that biking was an easier way to get to and from school. And it was a cheaper way to get to and from school. And I did it for a long time. And then for a long time, I kind of stopped commuting for a while because I had jobs that required me to dress up and look nice and all that stuff, and it was just kind of too difficult. But then, about I would say about 10 years ago, I sort of started figuring out how to go back to commuting on a bike, and I was try to do it 2 or 3 days a week, and then slowly over time, I kind of figured out how to plan ahead at night, pack up clothes. I kept a couple of suits at the office. I would, figure out, I would watch the weather, and I was doing it 2 or 3 days a week. And these days, I've kind of gotten back to the point where I'm doing it almost every day that I go downtown. Um, my office has gotten more casual in terms of dress, so it's easier to kind of pack clothes to wear to work. And I figured out how to do it and plan ahead. And it also helps that I now have a partner in crime, a friend of mine that I meet almost every morning right here at the Divvy station back there at about 6:30 when we commute downtown together. And so I've been, yeah, I mean, off and on, I've been commuting on a bicycle in the city for about 30 years. I I mean, I use it for commuting. I use it for errands. I use it for pleasure and for exercise. I, um, to me, a bad day is a day that I don't ride my bike. Um, and the weather's tricky sometimes, and there are definitely days where I stay away from snow and ice and that kind of thing. But I probably am on my bike almost every day, 10 or 11 months out of the year. So I use it for everything: commuting, running errands, exercise, hanging out with my friends. And there's a bunch of us that kind of bike together on the weekends as well. So I love being on my bike, and I love being on my bike in this city. Like, Chicago has so much going for it and so many places to explore. And so many of those places are way more accessible on a bicycle sometimes than they are in a car or even on public transit. So, um, the easiest example, and I don't go there very often, but the easiest example is Soldier Field. I think Soldier Field is a pain to get to, whether if it's a concert or a football game or any kind of event. And you can pretty much bicycle right up to it, and that's kind of cool. But I also think that there are side streets and paths, and in the 30 years that I've been riding here, they keep adding more and better bike infrastructure. They're not there yet. I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, but they have absolutely made a ton of progress. And in the 30 years since I've been riding, just the bike lanes and the paths and the the slower streets, and there's just so many places. There's places on the far south side that we bike to, places on the far north side. Just really interesting little nooks and crannies of what is, I think, one of the greatest cities in the world, um, and a city that seems to be heading in the right direction when it comes to bicycle infrastructure. Still got a ways to go, but there's just lots of places you can get to and a lot of times I can get to the loop from my house quicker on a bike than I can walking to the train and taking the Brown line. So my commute in the mornings, it's certainly my commute in the evenings coming home, is shorter than it would be if I took the train to and from the office and walked from the train station. So there's just, it's, I would say anything under a mile or two is easy. 5 or 6, I think you have to start planning for it. Longer than that, you probably also need to plan for it. But I would say that you can go a mile in this city faster and more efficiently on a bike than you can in a car. And, you know, a mile is a pretty short distance to go on a bike. And, it's better for the environment. You got to get good bags, and also fenders, because, splashing and raining, you don't want to, if you're going to be using your bike, even you don't want to walk into the grocery store with mud all over your back. But yeah, it's getting in and out of parking lots. The Trader Joe's parking lot where we live is always packed, but you roll up on your bike, lock it up out front, go in, grab your groceries, get out. Don't have to deal with the nonsense. When we travel or go on vacation or whatever, we like to do walking tours and biking tours because you can see a lot more of a city uh, on your feet or from a bicycle, and you can also stop and kind of check things out. And so again, like Chicago, they say it's a city of neighborhoods, and there are amazing neighborhoods that you can explore from your bicycle and get to pretty easily. I mean, I live in North Center, but two of my favorite neighborhoods in the city are Rogers Park and Pilsen. And both of those neighborhoods are just fantastic destinations for biking. And along the way, you go through, I don't know how many different neighborhoods, but you go on side streets and you see beautiful architecture. You see, interesting, I don't know, you see interesting storefronts, people, neighborhoods. It's just a great way to kind of interact with people and interact with the neighborhoods without necessarily being, inside of a car. And if you see something and you want to stop, you can stop. It's just, but between Rogers Park and North Center and Pilsen, there's just a million things to see. And you can take different routes. You can take the lakefront path. You can go through the city. You can, stop at farmers markets or, your, shops or whatever. There's just so many things that you notice more about the city when you're on a bicycle or on foot than you notice from a car. Yeah. And it's far less stressful. So I'm really excited about this ordinance that's just got voted on one of the committees of the city council to lower the speed limit to 25 in the city. I think that'll be huge. I think that cars tend to think that bicycles are an obstacle to them. And so sometimes the traffic and the car traffic gets really frustrating, and people in cars tend to get very impatient with people on bicycles. Now, at the same time, people on bicycles tend to, some of them and some of us are scofflaws and don't pay attention to things. But I think it shouldn't be a battle between cars and bicycles. It should be figuring out a way that we can all kind of coexist together. Because the reality is, people don't need to drive in this city as much as they do. And they need to respect the fact that some people choose to commute by bicycle. And quite frankly, some people commute by bicycle because they can't afford to buy cars. And they can't afford to, get around in Ubers or taxi cabs because it's too expensive. So I think, the traffic can be difficult, people jumping lights, people in cars that are driving distracted. It's scary out there. But you also just have to keep your eyes moving. And I also am not a big fan of people on bicycles with headphones on. I think that's dangerous because they can't hear you coming up behind them, and I think you need to make sure that you keep all your five senses as alert as possible. So again, I don't want it to be a battle between bicycles and cars because it shouldn't be, but there ought to be some understanding in both directions and accept the fact that, people are reckless whether they're on a bicycle or behind the wheel of a car, and we should just try to, minimize the amount of recklessness. I will bike in the rain on occasion. I think you really have to, think about the clothing options. And that's another kind of interesting thing that I've noticed in the last 30 years is that the the type of clothing that you can buy and the weatherproof gear, there's a lot of it available. And I think the technology has improved, but you have to dress for it. You have to dress in layers. I am not, I wouldn't necessarily call myself a year round commuter yet. I may get there one day. But I would say that when the temperature starts to dip below 30 degrees or there's snow and ice on the roads, I'm probably not biking those days just because the snow and ice scares me more than the cold. But when it starts to get really cold, the biggest challenge to me is keeping my toes warm. Um, I've really struggled to find good footwear to keep my toes warm. So and the last couple of winters have been really mild here in Chicago, so I've been able to bike 10 or 11 months out of the year, but we'll see what this winter brings. So I'm not ready yet to call myself a year-round biker, but I would love to get there, not at the expense of the climate, though. I don't necessarily want the winters to keep getting warmer, but I will look for gear and things that I can use to try to be a more year-round biker. But I think the other thing is fenders. Fenders and rain gear are key because if you have fenders on your bike, then you don't get then the water doesn't come up and splash you. It seems sort of like silly to say that it's such a simple thing, but fenders are huge. Like I have another bike that doesn't have fenders and I don't ride that bike in the rain because if it if it rains, then I get soaked. And then just rain gear, rain pants, rain jackets, that sort of thing. Um, and and that's kind of how you got to gear up for it, I guess. I think it's interesting. I, I'm 55 years old. I think that my commuting buddy and I, when we ride in the morning, we probably up the average age of bikers commuting into the loop by 20 or 25 years. So sometimes I hear from people, um, that's for the younger people, like, people in their 20s and 30s bike. Sometimes I hear from people that, they can't do it because they sweat too much or because they don't want to get dirty. And uh, I guess, what I would say is, you know, think about ways that you might be able to do it. Try to figure it out. Figure out the type of bike you want to ride. Figure out the gear and the clothing and how you can, you know, eliminate some of the barriers. Um, and it's not just for young people. And the older I get, like I feel like it's a way for me to stay in shape and keep my wits about me. There's so many upsides to it. Whether it's good for the environment, it's good for your health. It clears your head. Like that's the other thing is like all the anxiety that people seem to be having in the world of late. There is nothing better to me after a hard day at work or a difficult day at work or a challenging day at work to get on my bike and ride home. And then that half hour or so that it takes me to get home, I can clear my head and I don't come home. I don't walk into the house with, the anxiety from the workday, there. I've able to kind of release some of it a little bit. So I feel like I've gotten a little bit of a workout and I've cleared my head and I've put the whatever difficult challenges I faced during the day kind of behind me. And I think it just makes me a less anxious person. And maybe my family appreciates it a little more too. So no, I would just say that if you don't think you can be a bicycle commuter, maybe you ought to think again. And there's lots of options. Like I think I mentioned that my commuting buddy rides a divvy downtown every day. I don't ride divvies very often because I think they're heavy and hard to ride, but it is our daily morning commute, and it's almost like therapy for the two of us in the morning. Sometimes when we struggle with something going on at home or work, we can talk through things, touch on current events. But I think having somebody to ride with is also a great motivator. Like find somebody who's willing to ride with you or that you're willing to ride with, and it can make the experience much more enjoyable and much more pleasurable. And it might even help you deal with your own anxiety.
Thanks for watching that interview. Subscribe to see more conversations with Chicagoans biking around their city, dropping every other week.